Marcus flashed out of the room, immediately pulling the door shut behind him. The next second, no longer able to suppress the fear raging inside, he bolted into the bone-chilling rainstorm. The icy water crashed down, stinging him like tiny bullets, and the muddy ground was cold and slick. But he didn't care about anything except getting as far away as possible from that terrifying room. Away from that thing, away from that horror that should not exist. Help! Somebody help me! He screamed hoarsely, but his voice was instantly ripped apart and swallowed by the howling wind and rain. Small and powerless, like a pebble dropped into the deep sea. He didn't dare knock on old Walter and Sean's door, afraid of wasting time, and even more terrified that the thing would come chasing out. Marcus ran headlong, staggering through the dim lobby, crashing straight through the outer glass door, and sprinting out of the motel toward the town. His only thought now was to reach the highway, hoping a car might pass, even a big truck. The rain curtain was too thick. Strings of cold raindrops lashed his face and body like whips, the pain making his eyes water. Yet he could see nothing clearly. Marcus could only run frantically along the muddy, uneven path, guided by vague memory. The surroundings were pitch black. Even the reflective signs for the highway were blurred. Only an occasional flash of lightning allowed him a momentary view of the potholed road ahead. He didn't dare look back, constantly feeling that the female corpse had risen and was pursuing him in the darkness behind. He didn't know how long or how far he ran. Marcus felt his lungs burning as if with fire. Every breath was like pulling hot ashes from deep in his throat. Lightning occasionally tore across the sky, and for one instant, he saw a dark shadow looming in the darkness that the lightning had briefly illuminated. That wasn't the way to the highway. The highway should be on the other side. Through the misty rain, a faint, flickering light shimmered. What was that? He didn't stop to think. Where there was light, there might be people. Where there were people, there might be salvation. Grasping at it like a lifesaver, he changed direction and stumbled, sprinting desperately toward that faint glow. He fell again and again, his body caked in mud and water, but he always struggled back to his feet. Getting closer, he gasped for breath and laboriously wiped the rain from his face. The light grew clearer, and a vague outline gradually emerged. It seemed to be a small, lonely country church standing by the field. The white wooden exterior walls were mottled and weathered by the elements, and a simple cross on the spire stood resiliently against the storm. A warm but weak light, like candlelight, shone through a stained glass window, igniting a glimmer of hope in the endless darkness. He used all his remaining strength to rush to the church door, clenching his fists and wildly pounding on the heavy wooden door. "Open up, please! Open the door! Help me! Let me in! Something is chasing me!" After his fists hammered again and again, until his hands were red, a small window panel on the door was carefully slid open, revealing a wrinkled old face, an elderly priest wearing reading glasses. "Who is it? Child? So late? What is the matter? My God, what happened to you? Father, help me. Something is chasing me. From the motel. A dead woman. She moved. She blew breath. Let me in, please." Marcus was incoherent, his face a mix of rain, tears, and mud, his expression a mask of distorted terror. his eyes wide open. Anyone could see he was in an extreme state of panic. The old priest frowned, looking at his near hysterical state with confusion, clearly unable to make sense of the frantic words. Something? A dead woman? Child? Tell me clearly. Did you run into a wild animal, or did you hit your head? Was there an accident? He was inclined to think the young man was a survivor of a car crash or accident, suffering from shock and possibly a concussion. As the priest spoke, he hesitantly reached out to slide the bolt. Just then, driven by a strong, ominous premonition, Marcus instinctively glanced back in the direction he had come from, toward the field ravaged by darkness and storm. A bolt of lightning struck the field, illuminating the scene, and he let out a visceral, gut-wrenching scream filled with primal terror. A pale figure in a light blue nightgown was sprinting through the storm. Her movements were stiff, yet unnaturally swift, completely unlike a living person. She ignored the mud and the storm, running straight across the dark field toward the church. Her soaked blonde hair clung to her deathly pale face like seaweed, and her hollow eyes seemed to burn with a kind of icy blue flame, fixed relentlessly on him. The white ribbon on her forehead twisted wildly in the storm, like a mark of hell, a symbol of death. "She's here! She's here! Open the door! For God's sake!" Marcus cried out desperately, slamming his body against the heavy wooden door. The old priest saw the bizarre figure, gasped, his reading glasses sliding down his nose, and frantically tried to pull the heavy bolt. It was too late. There wasn't enough time. Emily, the corpse, had reached the church door, only a few steps away from Marcus. She stretched out her pale, withered hand, her nails gleaming coldly in the faint light filtering from the church, reaching directly for Marcus. Marcus was terrified, but his body instinctively dodged to the side, avoiding the corpse's grasp. He frantically ducked for cover behind a bronze statue at the church entrance. It was an ancient, life-size image of Jesus, weathered and mottled to a dull green. Without a second thought, Marcus huddled behind the statue, pressed against the cold bronze, his body shaking violently. The corpse's pounce was missed, and she seemed completely enraged, letting out a low, animal-like grunt. She quickly turned toward the statue, reaching out to grab Marcus. Marcus desperately used the statue as a barrier, weaving back and forth, narrowly avoiding each attempt. A strange and terrifying game of hawk and chicken unfolded right at God's door. The thunder, the sound of the wind and rain, Marcus's desperate cries and gasps, the strange noises from the corpse's throat, and the trembling prayers of the old priest inside the door, all merged into a nightmarish, horrific symphony. The old priest watched the terrifying scene through the small window panel, heart pounding. He shouted, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit," and waved the cross that had been hanging around his neck, but it seemed utterly useless. The thing was completely unaffected. He had served God his whole life and had heard of demonic possession, but he had never imagined that he would one day witness such a horrifying, such an evil sight. After several rounds of frantic pursuit, the female corpse stopped, right in front of the statue. She stopped chasing and just stared at Marcus, who was trembling behind the statue with her empty eyes, her chest not heaving. Marcus felt utterly weak. His hands braced on the cold bronze statue as he gasped for air, all his strength and courage depleted. The standoff lasted for about 10 seconds, the wind and rain still howling in the darkness. Without warning, she suddenly lunged forward, not grabbing for Marcus, but using an unbelievable force to tightly embrace the crucifixion statue. Her arms wrapped around the statue's torso and arms like iron bands, her fingernails even digging deeply into the metal seams. Her head slumped onto the statue's shoulder, her wet blonde hair hanging down her back. She remained in this embraced position, the wind and rain beating against her stiff body. All movement ceased. Was this a tired traveler who had found a home, or a struggling soul fighting against fate's injustice? Was she praying or mocking? No one could tell. The chase was over, and the storm seemed to be subsiding. Before Marcus could react to her action, he stared blankly at the scene. Fear and relief snapped his tight nerves. His vision went black, and he collapsed completely to the ground, unconscious. The old priest, still shaken, observed the stillness outside through the small window. After a long wait to ensure quiet, he finally trembled, reciting prayers, and carefully opened the door a crack. The biting cold wind immediately rushed in, making him squint. He saw that the terrifying woman was indeed no longer moving, and Marcus was lying on the ground. He cautiously approached Marcus first, squatting down to check for his breath, and relieved to find him breathing, sighed. "Thank the Lord," the old priest murmured. He nervously looked up at the woman. Embracing the statue, she had become one with it, almost leading one to believe this was the statue's original form. The old priest dared not delay. He called out to Marcus a few times, but seeing no sign of waking, steeled himself and reached out to help. The young man's body was heavy, soaked through his clothes, like they were weighted with lead. The old priest took one arm beneath his armpit and the other around his shoulder, half carrying, half dragging him, moving laboriously toward the church interior, step by step. The ground was slick, and the old priest slipped several times, his heart pounding violently. His strength was clearly insufficient, and he had to rest every few steps, continuously reciting, "Mother Mary, protect us. Mother Mary, protect us." He gritted his teeth, leaning against the wall for support, and managed to drag Marcus across the church threshold. So exhausted, he couldn't straighten his back. He closed the door, panting, and bolted it. Then he leaned against the door panel and slumped on the ground. His palms were covered in cold sweat, his hands were still shaking, and he was still muttering prayers. After composing himself slightly, the old priest struggled to his feet, stumbled into the hall, fetched a bowl of holy water, and splashed it onto Marcus's face, vigorously pinching his philtrum. After a long moment, Marcus let out a faint groan. His eyelids fluttered, and he slowly opened his eyes.